The smoke never truly left Hamburg. Even when the rubble cooled and the wind pushed the smell of burnt brick toward the Elbe, the air seemed heavy, as if it remembered what the fire had taken. In those days of 1943, the city was a hollow chest still trying to breathe. Between the ruins, children moved like ghosts, carrying messages, bread crusts, or rumors. They were called Speer, lookouts, though they were only 12, 13, sometimes younger. I remember their faces in flashes. A boy with one shoe tied around his neck, a girl with a tin badge she found and wore like courage. They whispered through alleys and hid in the broken cellars, believing they were helping someone, anyone, to end the war sooner. But when the soldiers caught them, there were no more words, only accusations. The children were branded as spies, though they carried no code but hunger, no allegiance but to survival. I was the school teacher then, one who marked their arithmetic papers, who kept their names in a ledger that burned with the rest of the classroom. When I close my eyes, I still hear the echo of their laughter from before the raids, before suspicion turned them into enemies of a city that had already lost its soul. How does a place rebuild itself when even its children are turned to ash by fear? My name is Margaret Voss, though the records may call me something else now. In 1943, I taught in a small school near the St. Georg district, or what was left of it after the July firestorms. My pupils came barefoot sometimes, carrying satchels patched with old cloth. Their lessons were often interrupted by sirens or the shuddering hum of planes overhead. Still, we tried to spell words like hope and home, to count beyond the sound of bombs. After the raids, many families vanished. Some fled to the countryside, others were never found. Those who remained scavenged what they could. The children became errand runners, slipping between checkpoints, carrying notes or bread for the black market. The Gestapo watched closely, always certain of conspiracies. When a group of boys and girls was caught passing messages, the city whispered they were spies, but I knew their handwriting. I had taught them to write. It was early September when the whispers began. The air smelled of coal and damp plaster, and the leaves that clung to the broken trees in the square were the color of dust. Someone told me that Emil and Frida had been taken. "Caught near the bridge," they said, voices low, eyes darting. I didn't want to believe it. Those children were my pupils, my morning light in a city grown dim. I went to the station after the second bell that day, still clutching the stub of chalk I'd been using to write Geduld, patience, on the cracked board. The streets were slick with rain, the cobblestones smeared with ash that never seemed to wash away. The building itself loomed grey, its windows dark and uninviting. I remember the sound of my shoes on the wet steps, a hollow tap that echoed louder than it should have. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco and suspicion. Two officers sat behind a counter, one scribbling lazily, the other watching me with a thin smile that did not reach his eyes. I asked about the children. "They are under questioning," one said, as if that meant something ordinary. They were seen carrying messages for enemy sympathizers. "Children?" I asked. "They can barely spell sympathizers." The man shrugged, and I saw something like satisfaction in his posture. "Orders are orders. The Führer's enemies come in all sizes." I waited for hours, hoping they would let me see them, hoping perhaps to speak sense or mercy into the cracks of the world. I never did. Around dusk, a truck pulled away from the rear courtyard. Its wheels splashed through puddles the color of iron. Behind the slats of the wooden gate, I caught a glimpse, just a flash, of a boy's hand pressed against the window. That night, the city was restless. The air raid siren cried once, briefly, though no planes came. I walked home through streets that still smoked from old fires, and I thought of their faces in the glow of the chalkboard. The way Frida always tilted her head when she read aloud, how Emil's laughter had once echoed down the corridor. I tried to imagine them as spies, as enemies. I could not. By morning, the rumor became truth. They were gone. "Executed," someone whispered, their words trembling as though they might be next. For treason, the newspapers said, but there were no names, no photographs, only an official note about enemy elements eliminated. I tore that notice from the wall and hid it in my coat pocket. That night, I burned it in my stove and watched the paper curl and blacken. The word treason turned to ash, just as their small bodies had turned to silence. No one spoke of them after that. Their families were warned to stay quiet. Their desks at school remained empty, but I could not bring myself to remove their names from the roll. It felt like erasing the sun. When I think back to that day, I no longer remember the faces of the officers or the sound of the rain, only the hollow weight of the chalk in my hand and the unfinished word on the board. Geduld, patience. For what? For justice that never came. Or for the day when someone, somewhere, would remember their names again. The school stood like a broken tooth among the ruins, its roof half gone, its windows blown inward, and the blackboard still hanging by a single nail. I went back there after the arrests, as if some part of me still expected to find them waiting. Perhaps I thought they might have slipped through the cracks of history, hidden somewhere between the fallen beams and dust. The streets leading to the school were almost unrecognizable. The houses had collapsed into themselves, leaving only staircases that led to nowhere, doors that opened onto sky. A few neighbors scavenged for bricks, muttering to one another in that careful, guarded tone people used when they feared that even silence could be overheard. I carried a small satchel. Inside it, a handful of their old exercise books. The corners were singed. The pages smelled faintly of smoke and old glue. When I reached the gate, I saw that someone had tied a ribbon there. Blue, faded, but still a ribbon. Perhaps one of the mothers, I thought. Perhaps a small act of mourning for children the city would not acknowledge. I untied it, held it for a moment, and felt something stir. A memory of Frida laughing, her hair tied with the same color. I tied it back. Some things should stay where grief leaves them. Inside, the floor was littered with plaster and shards of glass that glittered in the grey light. I stepped carefully, tracing my way to the classroom that had once smelled of chalk and soap. The desks were overturned, some broken, and on one of them I found the faint outline of a child's handprint, as if someone had tried to steady themselves during the bombing. Dust had filled every groove, every open drawer. I knelt there, brushing the surface with my fingertips. The quiet pressed close, thick and tender. On the wall, faint words still lingered in chalk. Wahrheit, truth. The last lesson we had written before the sirens came, that final time. I remember asking them what truth meant, and how Carl, the youngest, had raised his hand and said, "It means saying what you see." What he had seen, in the end, was the city burning around him. I found a corner of the room where the ledger had once been kept. The metal drawer was twisted by heat, its lock melted. I pried it open with a piece of wood, and inside, among the ash, was a scrap of paper, the top of a page that had survived the flames. My handwriting, a list of names: Lotte, Emil, Frida, Karl. The letters were smudged, but I traced them with my finger until I could almost hear their voices again. I whispered each name aloud. The sound of it startled a pigeon nesting in the rafters. It burst into flight, scattering soot across the light. I sat there for a long time. It must have been hours. The afternoon shadows stretched thin, and the city outside began to hum with the low sound of recovery. Hammers, wheels, footsteps. But I stayed where I was, trying to piece together something of what had been lost. In the corner, near the stove, I noticed a small tin box. It was rusted shut, but when I pried it open, there was a folded scrap of paper inside, one of their drawings. Crayons had been rare by then, but the faint colors still showed. A bridge, two stick figures holding hands, and a bird flying above. The bird was blue. I pressed it to my chest, feeling the paper crinkle, and I realized something simple and unbearable. The world they had imagined, one with bridges and blue skies, would never exist for them. When I finally stood, the air felt heavier. I placed the drawing on the teacher's desk beside a single unbroken piece of chalk. Then I turned to leave. The doorway had half collapsed, and sunlight filtered through the cracks, falling across the floor like the bars of a cage. As I stepped into the light, I thought of how small their hands had been, how eager they were to hold pencils, to write their names in clean cursive. The idea that those same hands had been bound in rope, that the city had condemned them without hesitation, it tore at something wordless in me. Outside, the ribbon fluttered faintly in the wind. For a moment, I thought I heard laughter again, distant, high and fleeting, like the sound of a memory escaping through the open air. After the trials, if they could even be called that, the city fell into a silence thicker than grief. The air itself seemed afraid to move, as though any sound might summon another accusation. The neighbors spoke only in murmurs, and the word Kinder became dangerous when followed by verraten, betrayed. Even the mothers of the lost children walked with their heads lowered, as if shame had been nailed to their spines. For weeks, I could not teach. The ministry had closed our school officially, though no one had said so aloud. The blackboard still stood. The desks still leaned against one another like drunks, but there were no children left to fill them. I would go there in the evenings anyway, to sit by the window and watch the sun die behind the ruins. That was where the letters began. At first, I wrote only to ease the weight pressing against my chest. To whom it may concern, I began one night, though I did not know who that might be. They were children, I wrote. Their hands still smelled of chalk and bread. The words came haltingly, like blood from a wound that refuses to close. I wrote by candlelight, the flame trembling as the wind slipped through cracks in the wall. Each night after that I wrote again, sometimes to no one, sometimes to them. Dear Emile, I remember the way you folded your paper boats. Or, Dear Frida, the ribbon is still there on the gate. It felt foolish at first, speaking to the dead through paper and ink, but it was all I could do to keep from forgetting the shape of their names. The soldiers came often now, searching for deserters or looters. They rarely looked at me, an old school teacher with soot on her hands and eyes too tired to betray anything. But I hid the letters carefully, wrapping each in brown paper and tying it with string. Beneath the lilac bush behind the school, where the soil was dark and loose, I began to bury them one by one. Some nights I could hear the city whispering. The walls spoke in creaks. The distant hum of factories revived for war. Somewhere a train passed, long, slow and empty. I imagined it carrying ghosts. It was during one of those nights that Frau Engel knocked at my door. Her face was pale and drawn, her hands twisted in her shawl. "You taught my boy," she said. "You remember him, yes?" "Of course," I answered. "Karl was—" I couldn't finish. She nodded, eyes glassy. "They came to me last week. They made me sign papers, said I must say he worked for the enemy." She swallowed hard. "He never even left this street." I wanted to tell her the truth, that her son had been brave, that he had carried bread to a neighbor, not secrets to an army. But the truth had become dangerous. To speak it aloud was to risk joining the buried. So I placed my hand over hers and said nothing. Silence had become the only language left that would not condemn us. When she left, I returned to my letters. That night I wrote for her too. I wrote of mothers who still washed a second cup at night, of teachers who still called roll in their dreams, of cities that tried to rebuild themselves on the bones of their own children. I sealed it with trembling hands and buried it beside the others. I sometimes wonder who will find them. Perhaps no one. Perhaps the paper will rot and the ink will fade until all that remains is a whisper in the dirt. But I like to think that words, like seeds, can take root even underground. That someday someone will dig into the earth and find one letter that still carries the smell of smoke and lilac, and maybe they will unfold it and read the first line. They were children. That is all. Years passed before anyone dared to speak their names again. The war ended in a silence so deep it felt like snow, falling without sound, covering everything equally. The city began to move again, slowly, painfully, as if learning to walk after a long illness. New walls rose where the old ones had burned, though the bricks still smelled faintly of smoke. Hamburg became a place of rebuilding, not remembering. People were tired of ghosts, but I could not forget. Every morning I walked the same path to the schoolyard, though there was no reason to go. Grass had begun to grow through the cracks, and the playground was a skeleton of rusted metal. Children played there again, new ones, with clean shoes and voices that rang through the air like bells. Their laughter was brighter, less haunted, yet each time I heard it, something in me twisted, joy and sorrow folding together like old paper. The ribbon still hung on the gate. Faded to the color of rain now, it barely moved in the wind. I sometimes replaced it with a new one, though I never told anyone why. The mothers had grown old or left the city, the families dispersed. The war had scattered us like ashes. Only I remained, tending to the memory as one tends to a grave that has no name. In 1950, a young man came to the schoolyard. He wore the uniform of the new police force and carried himself with the stiff posture of someone who wanted to do good, but did not yet know how. "You were the teacher here?" he asked politely. I nodded. "We're looking into the old records, the executions. There are rumors that some were unnecessary. Unnecessary. I remember how that word struck me. Thin, clinical, the way a surgeon might describe the cutting of something once alive. He asked if I had known the children, and I told him yes. "Do you remember their names?" he asked. I smiled, though the tears came before I could stop them. "Every one," I said. He wrote them down in a small notebook, his pen scratching softly. I gave him what I remembered, their ages, their favorite lessons, the way Carl would hum when he drew. I even told him about the letters, though not where they were buried. He listened, and when I finished, he closed the notebook carefully. "It matters," he said. "Even if no one ever sees the file, it matters that someone wrote it down." After he left, I sat on the steps until the streetlights came on. The city glowed differently now, quieter, humbler. But beneath that quiet, I could still feel the echo of the old fear, the habit of forgetting. In spring, when the lilacs bloomed again, I went to the garden behind the ruins. The bush had grown taller, its roots deep and strong. I dug where the earth seemed softest, and my fingers brushed against paper. The edges had melted into the soil, the ink had faded, but the shapes of the words still clung to the page. I held one letter to my nose. It smelled of damp soil and candle smoke. I did not cry. Instead, I read aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. They were children, that is all. The wind moved through the garden, and the lilac petals fell like slow snow. That evening I went home and wrote one final letter. Not to the children, not to the past, but to whoever might find these words when I am gone. I told them about the ribbon, about the names carved in my heart, about the quiet courage of small hands that had carried bread, not betrayal. I asked them simply to remember. Then I folded the letter and placed it beneath the floorboard beside my bed. I left it unsealed in case time itself wished to read it. Now the city hums with new life. The trams ring again, and children laugh without fear. But sometimes when dusk settles and the river glows copper, I still think I see their silhouettes. Small figures darting between the ruins, carrying their secret messages of hope through the smoke. What remains is not ruin, nor even sorrow. What remains is love, quiet, persistent, buried deep as roots beneath the lilac tree. Now, 80 years later, the wind still carries the faint smell of brick dust when it rains in Hamburg. The city stands again, clean and bright, but I sometimes think the children's footsteps linger beneath the stones, moving unseen, carrying messages to anyone who still listens. Perhaps that is what remembrance truly is, not grand monuments or speeches, but the quiet act of saying their names, even when the world has forgotten why. And you, dear reader, if you have stayed with me this far, please keep their story alive. Like this letter, let it pass from one heart to another. If this voice has reached you, please like and subscribe so that the stories of those who were silenced may continue to be heard.